Hi there, I'm Danny Flex and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday at 4:30 PM to look back on some recent events in the world of boxing. And this one's particularly hot off the press because although this comes out at 4:30 on a Monday afternoon, I tend to film on Monday morning. And I'm going to be reflecting upon something that only came out about half an hour ago as I filmed this. And I was going to do a vlog about something completely different. I wasn't really sure. Maybe something to do with the choice facing Ryan Garcia between Devin Haney and Tank Davis. Maybe I'll still revisit that because we're not going to get any boxing, certainly in the UK, until mid-February. But it's that very fact that I'm going to be talking about today. And we found out, as I say, about half an hour ago via email that the British Boxing Board of Control are going to be hosting or sanctioning rather boxing in this country once again from the middle of February. Now initially they decided to suspend all boxing tournaments, as they call them, in January, for the whole month of January, because of the overwhelming pressure on the NHS, and of course because of the great safety protocols we have in British boxing. You have to have ringside doctors, you have to have neurologists, paramedics, ambulances on hand, and events need to be within a certain distance of a hospital with a neurological unit. These are all protocols that were brought into place not long after the tragic events surrounding Michael Watson in his rematch with Chris Eubank Sr. That aside, and that's obviously a big positive, the idea was that they'd suspend boxing for January because the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic was peaking in the UK, or so it was thought. And the pressure on the NHS would mean that the doctors and medical staff that the Board of Control usually use to staff their tournaments would be required for more pressing matters and more urgent matters elsewhere. Purely logical, and I don't think many people complained about the decision at the time. However, we're now in a situation where the number of coronavirus cases are still rising. The number of deaths as a result of coronavirus are still increasing as well. And we've been told by the media and so on that the NHS, certainly in London, where a lot of tournaments take place, is close to breaking point. And you can imagine it's not too dissimilar a situation nationally. So with the pandemic getting worse and projected to, the hospitalisation certainly projected to increase in February when the board are planning to bring boxing back, it seems strange that they would decide that boxing was coming back when things are going to be worse than at a time when they decided they didn't have the resources to adequately sanction the sport. And it's hard to draw anything other than the conclusion that they've been pressured indirectly. I don't think it's kind of, no one's called them up and made veiled threats or anything like that, but they've recognised that Matchroom, certainly the leading promoter in this country, could move their events elsewhere outside British Boxing Board of Control jurisdiction if the suspension of boxing tournaments in this country lasts much longer. Eddie Hearn did an interview, I think it was last week, the head of Matchroom, of course, where he said, basically, we've got 5 shows planned between, I think it was February and the end of April, including Josh Kelly and David Avanesian for the European title, Dillian White's rematch with Alexander Povetkin, and others. And we plan to roll those 5 shows out regardless. So if it can be in the UK, which would be ideal, and the boxing board starts sanctioning boxing again, great. But if not, we will take our show on the road. I'm paraphrasing, although it sounds like something he'd say. We will take our show on the road and we will do it in foreign climes because obviously Hearn has promoted abroad. There's Matchroom Boxing Italy, Germany, etc., etc. He's got Matchroom Boxing USA, of course. And I didn't watch the whole interview, so I don't know if he specified where these events might take place. But there was a clear intention to go ahead with his promotions somewhere, wherever he could do it, and it would be commercially, financially viable, time-wise, presumably as well, in terms of time zones, for his broadcast partners, DAZN and Sky Sports. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's what you'd expect an innovative and forward-thinking promoter to do. Find a way to keep your shows going, keep your boxers gaining momentum, and keep everyone getting paid, of course, which is important. It's a short career, and if boxers don't fight, they don't get paid. And I should point out as well, before I go any further, that I'm absolutely delighted that boxing is coming back in the UK. This isn't a criticism of that happening. I'll be delighted to see it. I want to see boxers get paid. I want to watch boxing on TV at UK-friendly times. So that's all great. I'm happy about that. However, it's why the decision was made and when it was made, the timing of it and the incentive behind it. So Hearn did this interview basically saying, we're going to go on, we'll take it abroad if we have to. Absolutely fine. What doesn't seem fine is that the Board of Control, a few days later, maybe it was only the weekend that was in between when they don't really work, decided, I know, let's bring boxing back in mid-February. And it seems purely arbitrary because, as I say, hospitalisations, cases, deaths, all from coronavirus are increasing, not decreasing. The strain on the NHS is greater than ever going into February, not lessened from January. So their timing seems odd, and it'd be great to get an explanation of the rationale of the time from someone from the British Boxing Board of Control, ideally General Secretary Robert Smith, although the last time we saw Robert Smith on a video interview, it didn't go too well. The feedback wasn't great, and I can understand why he might want to avoid those in future. And it's very rare when you get these notices from the board that there's much elaboration. You know, even when it's kind of someone's passed away, it's always very brief. You know, we thank them for their services, etc., etc. And this one was no different. You know, we'll be bringing boxing back, dates and venues to be confirmed in due course. And that was it, really. I think it was like a one-paragraph notice. And yeah, it's economical, and sometimes that's good in an email or a notice. But in this case, it would have been good to get a broader explanation. Because if the NHS is still under huge strain, and the people that the board would usually use are still required to deal with the coronavirus pandemic, which is the biggest threat facing this country in several generations, or at least since the Second World War, why have we now got spare capacity, or why has the NHS now got spare capacity to staff boxing events, which, you know, as much as I love boxing, is not an essential service? That I can't answer, and I don't expect the board to answer it anytime soon. But it does appear, and I have to be very careful how I phrase this, and you know, don't want to get anyone into any trouble. And also, I don't want to cast aspersions if I'm wrong. But it does appear a little bit like the tail wagging the dog. In that, and I'm not saying that Hearn, when he made the comments about taking the show on the road, was trying to put pressure on the board. I'm sure he had, you know, sincere intentions to do it if that was his only option remaining. But I think the board's reaction is at fault here because they've looked at it and said, so our biggest promoter, the one who pays us the most in sanctioning fees, the one who puts on the most regular events, the biggest events at the moment in the UK, is going to take 5 big shows, particularly White Povetkin 2, which will be a huge box office event. He's going to take them abroad. We're going to lose a lot of money in sanctioning fees and expenses and so on. The relationship might be fractured as well as a result, long term. You know, if the shows are successful abroad, longer term, he could put more shows abroad instead of staging them in the UK, because if it's cheaper to stage them in the UK, there's no crowds at the moment, so there's no, you know, it doesn't have to be in the UK to attract a big gate. There's no gate revenue. If you can do it at UK friendly time, but, you know, get a site fee from another country or pay less for the venue or whatever it might be, if it works out to be more financially viable to do it abroad, and there's no kind of major incentive to keep it in the UK, especially if the board aren't, you know, if they've already trialled it during a period where the board had suspended boxing, what's to say that Matchroom wouldn't put more shows abroad and less in the UK? Now, I don't see that happening. I wouldn't have seen that happening even if they had trialled it. But that might have played into the board's mind, and they thought, well, we don't want that to happen. You know, maybe we're not quite ready to return in terms of the staffing and so on, but if we don't do this now, we could lose out on these 5 shows and potentially even more in the future. So what are we going to do about this? And presented with that dilemma, it appears, and I have to say appears because, again, no one from the board has provided an explanation as yet, and they may still, and if they're watching this, be glad to have anyone representing the board come on to SecondsOut and tell us the rationale. But it does appear that they've responded partly in fear from the Matchroom intentions to go abroad and bringing boxing back earlier than intended and earlier than is sensible, potentially. You know, what happens if we don't have adequate staff and someone gets injured or someone needs to be rushed to hospital and the hospital's stacked up with coronavirus patients, which seems to be the case in a lot of hospitals at the moment? You know, will the board specify, for example, to promoters that they can sanction events, but they have to be in areas where the local hospital or neurological unit is known to not be over subscribed? I mean, that would be a sensible measure, I think, but I don't know how easy that is to work out logistically. But you certainly don't want to, A, put more pressure on the NHS at a time when it doesn't need it, and B, put boxers at risk because the NHS is under strain and there's not enough room to care adequately for the boxers if they need it. You know, in an ideal world, we don't want any boxers to be taken to hospital, but even for things like exhaustion, dehydration, or just precautionary observation, you often see boxers taken to hospital after a contest or grueling 10 or 12 round fight. Time will tell, but I guess at the very crux of this, I don't like the idea that the board are being dictated to, whether directly or indirectly, by matters outside what should be their primary responsibility, which is the safety and well-being of the fighters and well, of all license holders. And I think the boxers' health comes beyond how many shows you're going to sanction or losing the sanctioning of particular shows. This is all speculation, of course, but until the board say otherwise, it does seem like the best, a rather unfortunate, congregation of two events. But we'll see. You know, maybe they'll come out and explain it, and maybe it'll make perfect logical sense. Hopefully not before 4:30 when this goes out, though. But we'll see. But let us know below what you think. Obviously, I expect everyone watching this to be delighted that boxing's back, as I am. But let us know what you think about why it's back at this particular time, and whether you think, as I do, that the board have been influenced by their reaction to the intention from Matchroom to go abroad if boxing hadn't come back in the UK as early as it did. I'll be back on Thursday for FLEXpectations, 4:30 PM, and next week Monday at the same time for the next Reflections. As always, really appreciate your time, and leave your comments below. Thanks very much.